Tall Tales. The Nymph Symphony.
Chapters.
Chapter 30. Regret. Time felt like sand pouring out of an hourglass. With each lunging step we took, I felt as though I was losing an extra piece of my prince to this world's darkness. I wasn't brave enough to look backwards and check on his bite mark, too afraid that I'd find the poison had already spread to a recently deceased beating heart. An arrow was in the unseen rainforest canopy above, firing flaming arrows from the skyline in order to guide me through her forsaken wilderness while she leaped, swung and bolted through the highest branches and vines safely above us. Together, we were racing through a howling night of vicious predators, plunging ourselves down the long-extinct rapids of an old streamless river and its former rocky waterfalls, slowly bringing us deeper inland as we were buried alive inside its high and treacherous jungle overhang, dodging all horned, clawed and fanged animals that stalked us from the lively rainforest branches and river shrubs along the grassy side trenches of the narrow river bed. My legs were locked sternly upon the molded saddle of a thin, slender, four-legged reptilian creature that I had carved and sculptured from my ogre guardian sheer moments prior to her descent. It looked real enough to be both terrifying and furious, but being built like a wingless dragon, it was also very slick and mobile in the way it quickly scurried itself through the black shrubbery of the Deathly Valley Gulf during mealtime. My thighs clenched hard against its flat, smooth, scaly back, requiring a strength equal to that of a deadly chokehold just to hang on to it each time a single sudden drop from the rapids bumped and rocked us about. Each uncontrollable bump along our dashing river descent was reducing that very hold I had affirmed upon the salamander I crafted and rode, at least just as much as it did to the loosening grip of my prince of who I was tackling to keep leeched upright upon my backside, while his lifeless arms remained wrapped around my front like a belt, across my pants and chest. Holding him so tightly, I was more prepared to follow the serpent beast along with him than I was to let him tumble off alone. I didn't feel in control of anything. I felt each jump and bump as if it were the one to knock us both off for good. Yet somehow, above all odds, I persevered through that everlasting struggle to cling to him, and one of the many scaly horns spotted across its slippery and slimy head of my conjured lizard-like protector. In retrospect, my greasy choice of creation was not ideal for the exact situation, but it did its job well enough. Given the rush state of things, lizards were notorious for being swift and agile under forest vegetation, capable of dodging adversaries and moving fast, which was paramount to Arlo's survival if we were to find Roganera's refuge in time. I had imbued as many protruding spikes into the creature's side as possible, using them as footlocks and sharp-bent handlebars as the creature slithered in its pursuit under broken tree branches and through the dark forest shrubbery, sniffing for the smoke of arrow fire sent by the rogue above, who was guiding us towards her alleged safe haven. On a mission, I felt like I was helplessly tipping over all the time, yet managed to resist the urges of slowing down, instead just battling to avoid each fast upcoming branch and bush ahead of us, constantly blinded by mountains of mud getting hurled into my eyes and face after being kicked up from the swampy river bed by the beast, with each jump and step it made upon its speedy descent. There was a thick coating of wet sand and silt being glued into the grimy skin of the beast, making the skin feel even grosser than how it started, although with its proving supremely effective to preventing other pouncing critters from pinning the creature I rode down, as my serpent continued to stump and slither valiantly through the gauntlet of flying bugs, thick-fanged gnats, and all things clawing across the ground. Unlike me, the creature I made was fearless, and it was undeterred by the screeches or the attempted grabs made against its wet skin. The beast continued to scuttle, jump, and belly flop right down the river track towards its lowest levels, frequently splashing and blurring my vision with the filth of mud and muck, which was washed away moments later by heavy falling rain that began filling up the dry river ravines we endlessly followed. I had done my best to compensate my balance for each speedy left turn made, and sharp, shaky vibrations that rocked my insidious creature every time we were charged sideways by a hungry and ravenous insect aggressor. Each slippery bump they made against us always seeming to push Arlo and me upwards towards the serpent's wide, fat, thorny head, making it harder to maintain a steady balance through the dense overgrowth. We tipped too far forwards and then recorrected too far backwards, while attempting to chase the next flaming volley of arrows the rogue was sending down the line ahead of us. Fortunately for us, our ride ducked and dodged most obvious danger zones within the densest and deadliest swamp sector. The creature had kept us flat and low to branches above the ground, distant from each corner river mud hole that tended to hide and ambush predator. And despite the calamity we were caught in, I had a good sense for places prone to disaster. Ignorant to perhaps only 2 or 3 retracted mantis claws as they sprung at us rapidly from the river reeds to our sides. Faint shadows of thick serrated insect talons made to mimic idle fallen twigs, hanging out of the grasses as they moved for the kill in response to our passing. It was pure luck alone that none of my dress got snatched and dragged in towards her massive teeth. Much of the time I was at the mercy of those deadly insects simply because they resembled the very brown branches of immediate scenery as they dangled their claws upside down, like fish hooks from the patchy tree overgrowth slightly above the bedrock. Blessed to have missed all their well-timed swipes through incidental quick and abrupt swiveling turns as we left them in the distance to humbly return to their inconspicuous camps, drooling in an impatient suspense of the next foolish creature to come along and not be as lucky as we had been. I had lost all common sense, so it would seem, choosing to dive desperately into obvious ambush areas along a one-way river to hell, with nothing but an idle hope that if I did it, everything might be okay once again. And so, without need of my own control or direction, the serpent kept diving us down into the thistle reefs of a rebirthing river stream as it passed the next rally of flame arrow markers sunk into the rain puddles of the small but rising muddy river stream. The rogue above slower to guide us further along any of the hazardous riverfront and its muddy plains due to the extra distance she had to cross while up in the safer tree branches. Rather ominously, she never even attempted to weave us a safer path through the teeming hostile river, like the safe path she took up above. Perhaps she thought I could take it on, or was merely hoping that I couldn't and was trying to kill Arlo and me in the most gruesome way possible. Regardless of her intent, however, I had no choice but to trust her as we risked threading the needle through the lowest and most lively pocket of predators by the river pools before its damming end. Just ahead, on the right side trench shallows we ran along, there was a crowd of thick shelled leaf beetles that kept in their herd while they grazed the reeds peacefully, too big and bulky to be disturbed by all the other carnivores of night. They were the only pleasant beings left in their world, and yet I had no choice but to fortify my salamander with as much armor as I could under the forest moonlight, so I could stampede straight through and past them, my shadow attempting to knock or scare them out of the way as I physically blocked any further progress I could make across their swampy river track. Against the bumps of their own defensive tramples, my hand rocked and slipped as I cut the side of my arm rather nastily on one of the side spikes I had added. I looked backwards to check on my paralytic prince and make sure he was okay, only to see the very bite mark I feared of, and be reminded of just how insignificant little cuts and bruises even mattered to him, given his dire situation. I hoped he was alive because he looked just as blue and white as a rotting corpse. To me, it felt like every extra second that passed was that one vital second of time he needed to live. "Hurry!" I shouted upwards into the canopy, without a care in the world of who or what else might overhear it, stuck waiting for another arrow to follow, only one available hand to stabilize Arlo and me on the beast while we were stuck without motion. Arlo's head swung heavy, rolling from one side of my shoulder to the other and then back again, as he seemed like he might be dropping in and out of both consciousness and paralysis. We were stationary for too long, allowing the ambitious buzzards to swoop from their trees as they came pecking at us from above. They screeched and snapped their beaks just above our heads, only to collide into leaves and be caught and swallowed up by a coiling net of trapdoor plants with razor-sharp stems and leaves that seemed to enclose over them like a clamp from the reeds we had unsuspectingly stood beside in that short time. Maybe it was me that did it, but most things I created came from history or myth I had been told about, and those dark carnivorous plants looked like nothing I had ever seen or known before in the past, other than some skilled hybrid renditions of prehistoric armadillos that helped to design the thorny devil salamander we were mounted upon. Even my imagination was limited, and I was left rightfully blinded by terror, whilst we sat idly among a nightmarish wilderness of carrion feeders, whether they be fungal, floral, or animal in nature. Everything that was still living seemed to have adapted to survive only by eating upon the deathly remains of whatever failed to become carnivorous in the first place. The land itself was hostile. Even the ancient beast I sat upon felt like no match to the beings of their strange cold wintry world. And yet I had surrendered all control of our movements to my own subconscious impulses and inhibitions, making me feel every bit the backseat passenger as Arlo while he and I waited in the dead center of the single most dangerous yet direct route through the merciless midnight forest glades. I kept my eyes up to the sky in search of direction, observing a flock of 100 blood-sucking needle-nosed critters fluttering up in the sky above the tree line, flapping their wings as some landed to scratch their talons into the wood stalks of branches while they squawked, warning each other about the intruder somewhere up there with them, as I waited for her and her arrows to send me to my next location. Unimpressed by the delay, I was a powerful spectator to a scenery instantaneously changing around myself, watching trees dig up from the earth with 100 legs as they changed location from beside me. Centipedes opening their eyes, just as other creepy crawlers uncurled themselves from the rock deposits they pretended to be, as they came out of protective hiding in order to inspect whether I was a threat to them or not. Luckily for Arlo and me, they took one look at my basilisk dragon predator and decided it would be best to move away, the forest distancing itself in a ring around me. My whimsical nature perhaps being strange enough to warrant some level of true threat and concern to their everyday madness. My monster companion had helped me survive the river run without any serious disposition, but I had no time to marvel over recent advancements I had made in my own puppet sorcery. That reptile needed to move, but there were no more arrows to follow. I had no choice but to wait. I started wondering if Rogue and Arrow was actually real, feeling delusional up until the point one last arrow was launched overhead towards a wooden dam that stopped the river mid-flow. Her arrows were remarkably precise, perhaps even better than Zephyr was with that leafy green forest bow. Quite simply put, Inara had suddenly acquired new talents, and yet substituted them in place of other just as vital ones. She wasn't herself anymore. Now she was just another one of those battle-hungry gnoll fanatics. Nevertheless, I chased the arrow to its location, with the last arrow landing down the stream upon the thick log that blocked any further passage forward, looking directly upwards to see it implanted at the top of the thick fallen tree's highest perch. To the left of me was a built-up pool of fresh water that seemed to keep up the whole swamp sector alive. Although having reached their apparent destination, Inara changed directions from above, retracing her steps backwards through the trees in the direction we'd just come from, back towards the squawks of the needle-nosed buzzards. I still felt as though I was going to climb into a trap, and that I couldn't completely trust Inara anymore, having only seen death and corruption in the faces I had seen so far. But regardless of my skepticism and distrust of her, I knew my choices were limited, and so I dismounted my ride so that I could prepare to climb up the log and see what was on the other side of the damming floodway. As with the closing of my hands, I started compressing the slimy ride we rode, while Arlo remained slumped across its back. Sponge hard into ice and then granite to the toughness of diamond and steel, as I reduced the size of my ride to that of my own size. The protector had taken the reformed shape of a knightly man as it carried Arlo over its shoulder with ease, a body and helmet-like plate mail as that shadow started climbing the log by its branches, taking lead as it made the climb without me or my consent. I created wings for myself and zoomed to the top, arriving first beside the arrow, where I observed the dry vineyard clearing beyond that point. A natural dam blocked all the rainwater collected, as everything beyond the point seemed to be nothing more than a dry, barky woodland hollow, with the only track to follow being one long empty river and its expired meadows forever ahead. It couldn't have been the way onwards, as there was nothing out there to see. But turning back to the log on the other side of the river, it came to me with the faintest eye, the shortest sparkle of a light I was hoping for, a source of campfire smoke arising out of a cave entrance that was hidden in the branches at the end of the fallen tree. It was the most inconspicuous burrow ever concealed, something sealed away from sight using the leaves of the fallen tree to help break the smoke that came out from its underground chimney spout. I walked along the giant long dam bridge, as I finally came across the cut wooden branch steps that led down to a dim and muddy dugout underground bunker. My shadow and I carefully lowered ourselves down the thick ladder steps as we descended into the groggy renegade-style tree hut that had been hidden away from the rest of the world. We entered into the cabin darkness, my shadow moving in first without proper inspection, standing in way at the bottom steps as I approached and peered into the tree hut bunker. A bright campfire burned across from a long, large rectangular table that seemed to apprehend a great deal of my attention. considering its size and general focus point in the center of this underground bunker. I had a certain pain that came from staring into the campfire light, enough of an annoyance to notice I was intruding on a family, without word or greeting yet to be said. My natural assumption just being that trespassing wasn't an issue, given the current state of things, finding it strange to be stared at in curiosity by two female gnolls wearing shrouds. They stood beside the mantel of the chimney fireplace and corner edge of the table, bewildered by my surprised appearance among them.